It seems like something that is rarely talked about but is pretty fundamentally true about us is that we're all mostly ignorant. Confusion, ignorance, and uncertainty are aspects of the default human state as a result of the nature of what we are. We are aspects of reality temporarily arranged in these metastable patterns because of the chaos of this insanely complex process we call evolution. Chemical structures clumping together in temporary states and replicating, retaining information from the previous form and changing slightly each iteration in walkstep with a changing world. Interacting in an environment with similar repeating structures that have branched off in different ways, happening to interact with the things that sustained the grouping long enough to reproduce, or don't. Over billions of years we have emerged from this complex jumbling of the material on the surface of our planet. We are all born with no knowledge whatsoever of this, not understanding what anything is, we just are. Animals, unaware of why they seek food, feel pain, where they are, how they emerged, what they are made of, what processes are going on within their own anatomies, any of it. Organisms that exist with inbuilt behaviors that gradually emerged as they enabled continuous survival and propagation in similar environments to the ones their ancestors happened to exist in. We did not evolve to have a comprehensive understanding of all the aspects of reality around us. Most of the processes going on are invisible to our base perceptions. Eventually, the species that calls itself human has gradually developed the ability to pass information down in ways that differ from any of the other shape-shifting dynamic chemical groupings we call life that exist on this planet. Through our ability to recognize patterns and conceptualize them through language, and through writing and processes like science, we've been able to build upon and accumulate knowledge, making progressively more sense of the world we find ourselves in, as it is independent of us. We have developed degrees of meta-awareness and the capacity for reflection beyond what other species are capable of. Each individual human is varying degrees of ignorant, and having emerged from a state of complete and total ignorance, this makes sense. Each one of us is trying to make some sense of things as our brains process countless bits of information received through our senses. And especially nowadays with the internet, we near constantly expose ourselves to new information each day in this incredibly vast landscape of noise. Some go about the pursuit of trying to comprehend this reality we happen to find ourselves in with more honesty, structure, and meta-awareness than others, more actively trying to create order within their minds. While others, or perhaps even most, coast more passively towards that which makes them feel comfortable, that which caters to our baser instincts, often conforming to the ways of thinking that are locally normal. Our evolved tendencies influence our behaviors to varying degrees, and not understanding and recognizing them within ourselves leads to a higher likelihood of succumbing to them, of falling for the neurological path of least resistance, that which takes less effort. Some actions and ways of thinking contribute towards lessening your ignorance, while others make it stay relatively constant, and some things outright make you more confused. Reading or watching educational videos can help lessen your ignorance, whether it be about philosophy, psychology, biology, chemistry, physics, or other aspects of reality humans have dedicated time to conceptualizing and trying to make sense of. Writing, or even just sitting with your thoughts and reflecting on ideas you've learned about, is another way that can help lessen your confusion, as it can aid with integrating and internalizing the ideas you've exposed yourself to, a process that can be improved upon as better reasoning and critical thinking skills are developed. In reflecting, you can think about which thoughts are even worth thinking about and why. Over the past several years, I've developed a love of reading, specifically educational nonfiction books, but now I'm trying to dedicate more time towards writing and editing, as it's a way of having the feedback of seeing my thoughts on the screen and reading them back and refining them, thinking through the ideas and their implications, integrating the things I've learned and am learning, and hopefully creating things of value. When you read a good book, you are learning from what the author has learned. They don't have all the answers, of course, but a well-written book shares new perspectives and insights, and is the result of someone who reasoned well and spent time developing understandings on particular topics. You're taking the hard-won information they've gathered and organized, and ideas they have reasoned through, likely over years, in the condensed and polished form of a book, a valuable little tome of knowledge. The patterns of some aspect of the complexity around us made some sense of, and as you consume it, the structures in your brain are shaped by it, as with all information you consume, and some of their understandings may, with some effort, become part of your own. And they are more likely to the more time you spend reflecting on the ideas presented, how they relate to your other understandings, as opposed to just reading through it quickly and jumping from one idea to the next, forgetting a lot, if not most, of the information presented. The pursuit of knowledge is ultimately about the attempt to navigate ever further away from our default state of near complete ignorance and confusion. Ideally, we can build each other up, learning from the knowledge of past minds, starting from where they left off, building upon, expanding, and refining, optimizing our minds and positively influencing those around us. From an understanding of the reality of our ignorance and confusion due to the nature of what we are, in tandem with an acknowledgement of the vast complexity that surrounds us, it is apparent that no human has all the answers, or ever even could. The amount of information one brain can hold is finite, and the amount of information out there to learn is incredibly vast. What you understand seems to be in no small part due to things outside of your control, such as the point in history you emerged within, the environment you happened to grow up in and the people you happened to connect with, the genes you have, and so on. Total knowledge of everything is impossible. There could always be something you don't know. Perfect minds are an imperfect ideal, and no human should be held too highly on a pedestal. We all have our flaws and are mostly confused to varying degrees. People tell stories about rare humans among us who have supposedly had prophetic knowledge, or have been enlightened, who are somehow mysteriously greater than the rest of us, aware of things that evade most. But when it comes down to it, they are human, emergent from similar conditions as the rest of us, with objectively similar biologies, subject to similar biases and tendencies to commit fallacies. The claims made by them or about them are just that, claims, often without evidence to support them. People make claims that go against what we understand to be true of reality through examining and reasoning through what is actually present and observable around us. The people who are put on these pedestals, gurus, prophets, saviors, etc., do not live up to the claims made by and about them. Bound by and to the same conditions and laws of reality as the rest of us, limited fundamentally in their understandings of the complexity around us, as all minds are. Sure, some may have had some valuable insights, but this isn't evidence that they are magical or that they were right about everything they ever said because they sometimes had good ideas. Each idea presented has to be weighed on its own merits and by how accurately it corresponds to reality around us as observed. We are all capable of, and often are, wrong about things, and we seem to generally have a strong tendency to try and reaffirm that which we wish were true. Fundamentally, we are all working with limited information and can only ever try to continuously form a more coherent representation of reality in our minds. Recognizing your own ignorance and confusion is the first step towards lessening it. It's a worthwhile and existentially valuable pursuit, as without doing so, you are more likely to cause unnecessary suffering or waste time, thought, and money based on misguided and confused understandings and beliefs. Decreasing ignorance is a lifelong, never-ending endeavor, fundamental to which is the willingness to being open to the possibility that what you thought was true was wrong. Being willing to change your beliefs based on knowledge gained, independent of your emotions towards the implied conclusions. In understanding more about the reality of ignorance, insight can be gained into why humans act so seemingly stupid sometimes. We are all born without a framework to understand the best ways to know if something is true or not, and we seem to have a propensity for picking up outlandish beliefs. Skepticism is a trait that may have been selected against, as it could have led to isolation from the group, while believing whatever myths the group believes in fostered social cohesion. People often haven't developed the frameworks in their minds to understand why what they're doing is harmful and/or a waste of time, and may have convinced themselves of the opposite and don't want to believe otherwise. Too often, you encounter people who are blind to their confusion and confident in their ignorance. People become confident that they are right, without honestly assessing why they believe what they do, and whether those beliefs likely correspond to reality. People can cling so hard to what they just want to be true without honestly assessing the validity of those beliefs, and avoiding even honestly considering the possibility that they might be wrong. Any challenge or criticism can seem as insulting, so some will shelter themselves away from information that contradicts the things they wish were true. A sort of failure mode they've trapped themselves in, where they've limited or stagnated their potential to navigate away from confusion in favor of comforting fantasies. Admitting they are wrong would require an uncomfortable shift in how they see reality, a restructuring of understandings, of neural architecture, and perhaps an existential crisis or a moment of ego confrontation in the admission of error. We have a tendency to want to remain comfortable, even if that comfort comes at the cost of our capacity to reason honestly and live at terms with reality. As a species, we're just starting to make more sense of the complexities around us, and science is the most reliable and consistent method we've developed and continue to develop and refine to help us lessen our confusions and further our understandings. The knowledge gained from scientific inquiry is immense, more than any one human mind could ever hope to understand in their lifetime, and it is a method that only in the last few centuries we've begun to apply. To do science, we have to admit our confusion and ignorance, make guesses, and then check to see how accurately those guesses actually reflect the source material, aka reality itself. There's a limit to how much information we can spend time understanding. Our brains are capable of learning, but we do so at a pretty slow rate, and can only learn so much before we inevitably decay. So we have to continuously decide and reason through which areas are valuable and worth spending mind on. Time spent somewhere is definitionally time not spent elsewhere, on an existential level. The reality of confusion and ignorance is so inherent to being, but often ignored in favor of a comforting but false sense of certainty. Ultimately, reality is the way it is, regardless of what we believe. And by trying to live at terms with it, we can work on better navigating our environments and find common ground in the real instead of the made-up. Humanity has spent most of its history denying the reality of our confusion and ignorance, and in large part still continues to. What acts as an existential coping mechanism may end up being an existential threat to our continued survival as a species, as we fight over conflicting made-up explanations about how reality operates and the ways we should supposedly act based on those understandings. When we act in ignorance or with a severe lack of meta-awareness, when we speak or act impulsively, when we hold things with certainty and aren't open to criticism, we are much more prone to making mistakes and causing harm. Due to the nature of what we are, or at least what we understand to be most likely true of ourselves up to this point, we never know exactly what the consequences of our actions will be. We're always working with limited information, but we can make educated guesses. We can expose ourselves to better information, and reason through and refine our understandings of what better information even is. We can reflect on and continuously work on reasoning through what is worth valuing and why. We can learn about why we tend to gravitate towards the things we do. and we can learn to process information in more effective ways and hopefully cause less harm to ourselves and others. If we're to grow as a species and reduce the vast amounts of needless suffering we cause, then I think we should encourage a culture of lifelong learning to reduce our collective confusions, and to understand ourselves and the world around us better. The person you are most capable of changing is yourself.